All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
And hello all. From east to west, we welcome you. We are live and excited that you are here. Also excited for everyone who is going to be joining us today. I mean, Kim among the people who will be joining.
Kim, how are you?
Yeah, and Tony among those who will be.
Thanks, Tony.
I'm also excited to welcome in hour one, Trita Parsi, one of the brilliant minds when it comes to Iran and what's going on within Iran. Also, these negotiations, which were ostensibly about the Iran nuclear deal and the nuclear materials that were being enriched to produce a weapon. Parsi knows chapter and verse on this because he was the key advisor to the Iran nuclear deal under Obama. So, of course, that was the one that was torn up, even though Donald Trump couldn't tell you one thing that was in it, but he knew if Obama's name was on it, he didn't want it. Now we find ourselves, the great superpower America, begging for some help. Yeah, we're into something that is a total mess, and I think the messiness of it is finally being realized by the Mad King. We'll talk about that. I also will tell you that in hour two, the Pulitzer Prize winner David Cay Johnston joins us. That should be terrific. Early is where we are. I apologize, Mark. I was assuming the show would start at 11:45, but you were on time, says Stan Pollock, CPA, my favorite CPA. Thank you for the super chat.
Big shout out.
Even though you had little faith. The idea behind the 11:30, when he says 11:45, these are Pacific times, those in the East Coast, so we start at 2:30. And the idea is that we can get a lot more done, and we will try to get wheels up as close to 2:30 Eastern as we possibly can. Happy St. Patrick's Day, lads and lasses. Cheers from Richard Delamater.
Big shout out.
It is St. Patrick's Day, and it is Trump's duty today, even as he deals with the situation in which he is hip deep in trouble in Iran, to welcome Ireland's Prime Minister to the White House. Yes, it's what we do. Meantime, the White House getting word today that a Trump official has quit over the Iran war.
No.
The top counterterrorism official is stepping down over the Iran war. And this is the guy who is super clearance in terms of security, right? The top counterterrorism guy. He's also a huge Trumpy. Joe Kent is his name. He ran for Congress. And he ran for Congress as a total Trumpy. He's way in on Trump. He's so in on Trump that he does that whole, the last election was stolen thing. You know, the Biden election was stolen. He's all about that. January 6th, that's him, Joe Kent. Even for him, this is a bridge too far, this war. He said in his resignation letter, quote, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel. So there you have it. Meantime, European countries are rejecting Trump's call for help in reopening the Strait of Hormuz. Trump saying that we need our allies. Where are our allies? You know, the guys I was tariffing and smack talking and saying we didn't need. I was kidding. We, of course, need you. Now we are strong enough to go it alone, Trump says, because you guys have said you're not going to join us. It was all just a loyalty test, and you guys didn't pass. And I'm not going to forget it, is what he says. He literally has said these things. He also believes that he will have the honor of taking Cuba. Speaking at the White House, and I have this, we'll share this with you as the show proceeds. Trump called the island a failed nation and said, quote, I think I can do anything I want with it. This is on the same day that Cuba's national electric grid suffered a total collapse. 10 million people are without power there. And the reality is that much of that is because of the energy embargo imposed by America. So it is, it's an unfolding human tragedy in Cuba that we have a hand in. And what could really happen in Cuba that would help would be to help the Cuban people. The isolation of Cuba in the manner that we have decided to isolate it is not only not going to get you where you want, but it's also claiming a huge human toll on the island of Cuba. So
I heard that that Canada is running woefully behind in the race to become America's 51st state.
Is that right? You
Yeah.
think Cuba has now
No.
outpaced?
It's not Cuba. No, it's not Cuba. The 51st state, apparently, according to Trump, Venezuela.
Oh, wow. He does.
Now Trump's, yeah.
He's keen on Venezuela now. He says things are great with Venezuela. Just great, great, great. Never been better.
He liked that they won, the Venezuelans defeated Italy in a World Baseball Classic yesterday. And so he took to Truth Social saying, wow, Venezuela defeated Italy tonight 4-2 in the WBC baseball semifinal. They're looking really great. Good things are happening to Venezuela lately. I wonder what this magic is all about. Statehood number 51, anyone? That's what he wrote.
The amazing thing about that is that we have a 5-alarm fire going in the Middle East, and he's busy with that crap. I mean, he's truly the Mad King. Play me cut 14 on the honor of running Cuba, if you would, please, Tony, the president. Always happy to digress to talk about that which he'll be taking charge of.
I believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba. That'd be a good honor. It's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth?
Yeah, and things are going so well for him in the Middle East. You know, why not just move Cuba to the front burner? Absolute lunacy. I mean, it's a sense that you get from Donald Trump that fueled the Middle East incursion. This entire military flex was reflected in those comments. Things are going great. Jumped in and out of Venezuela on the crack high from that, and from the bounce in my step that I got off the 12-day Iranian bombing, I'm going to blast into Tehran, and I'll wrap this whole thing up in a few weeks. It's lunacy. It's insanity. Warned against it. He did it anyway. But it's that hubris that makes him think, yeah, I'll take Cuba. I'll run it. We'll send Marco down there. How hard could it be? The blithering Donald Trump, I'll have more of later in the show. But for now, Iran, Venezuela, Cuba, which country next, says Rain. Yeah, exactly. I don't want to keep Trita Parsi waiting, so I'm going to move along. But great to be here, and smash the like button if you would. You know, do all that YouTube stuff for us. All right.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It's really great to have this guy on. I'm such a fan. He was a key advisor during the negotiations of the Iran nuclear deal. And again, he's widely regarded as one of the most distinguished scholars on Iran, founder of the Quincy Institute, has written books that are highly acclaimed. Treacherous Alliance, one of his books, The Secret Dealings of Iran, Israel, and the United States. A Single Roll of the Dice, Obama's Diplomacy with Iran. His latest book is called Losing an Enemy, Obama, Iran, and the Triumph of Diplomacy. That was the behind-the-scenes story of the nuclear deal with Iran. How about it for Trita Parsi, everyone? Yeah. Hello,
Thank
sir.
you so much, Mark, for that kind introduction.
I'm very excited to have you here, and our time is limited, so I will get right into it. I want to talk about something that you touched on, I think, in a New York Times op-ed piece that you did. You were speaking of the way in which the religious doctrinal regime in Iran really will not be unseated easily. Can you speak to that?
Yes, what I wrote in that New York Times op-ed was, trying to debunk some of these very optimistic and unrealistic assessments that have existed in the discourse in the U.S. and inside the U.S. government, thinking that, taking out the supreme leader of Iran would cause an implosion of the regime, or simply that moving a lot of naval assets to the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean would terrify this Iranian theocracy and force them to surrender. These were completely unrealistic expectations. And I think one key thing that the administration did not understand, or at least the president didn't, despite the fact that I communicate this directly to them, was that they operated on the basis of thinking that the Iranians feared war more than they feared a surrender, whereas in reality, they feared surrender far more than they feared war. They can survive a war. They can survive even if they lose a war. They cannot survive if they surrender. Their entire base of support, which I personally don't think is much more than 15 to 20% of the Iranian population, would turn against this theocracy. And that's the one group that they cannot afford to alienate.
It's interesting that you point to that, because that minority in rule of Iran really belies this secular nation filled with people who want to realize their potential as a nation, and they're being held down by these religious clerics.
Undoubtedly. I mean, this is a regime, a system that is operating on the support of a minority of the population. It is still very different, though, from Saddam Hussein's regime or Gaddafi's regime, because those were regimes that were centered on specific individuals. And if you did take out those individuals, the rest of the system would fall. Moreover, those regimes didn't have a basis of support that was, any part significant. It was only those who were directly benefiting from the regime. If we assume that I'm right, that this support level for the Islamic Republic is no more than 15 to 20%. Some people put it as high as 30. But nevertheless, if we assume that I'm right, we're still talking about 18 million people. That is a very significant number. That's very, very different of Maduro's regime or Gaddafi or Saddam or even Bashar al-Assad. So these are some significant differences that have been glossed over, misunderstood. Part of it is just based on misinformation. The Israeli government deliberately ran a campaign to try to make it look as if Iran was much, much weaker than it was, knowing very well that Trump is not in principle against war or in principle against regime change. He's just against things that are too difficult, that don't yield a very quick and glorious victory for him. But if you could convince him that Iran is on the brink of collapse, that all you need to do is push a little bit and you will be the hero, then if you make that argument, then you can convince him to do something that goes flying right in the face of the promises he made to the American public when he said that he's against war and he said that he's against regime change wars.
Yeah, this is certainly not on brand for him, at least as he was a candidate now as president. And his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the guy who was handpicked by Trump, warned him off of this, and he still couldn't resist. I guess that's what you get when you have a guy who doesn't really read the briefing materials, is just kind of going on his gut. And as I say, was just coming off the sort of the high off of the bombing campaigns that sort of were in and out in Venezuela and the 12 days in Iran,
Absolutely. I think the success in Venezuela, at least in the short term, I think the longer outlook is still, the jury is out on that. But nevertheless, that definitely fueled the sense of hubris in the White House, and particularly with Trump himself. And I do think it will probably be revealed one day that many of these other figures who tried to push him off his course, because this was really driven by Trump himself within the White House. Outside of the White House, a lot of pressure from Israel and certain pro-Israeli voices. But inside the White House, it's just the president himself. But those who are trying to kind of gently push him off that trajectory did so perhaps far too gently than they should have. They could have put forward much stronger opposition. It appears to me, based on conversations I've had, that they didn't go much more aggressive, or aggressive is even too aggressive a word to use in this context, but they didn't push back hard because they saw what happened to those who had pushed back hard. Many of those who pushed against the Iraq war in June, the Iran war in June, were no longer at the table by December. So the cost of pushing back against that actually ended up being that you lost your position as someone that the president was listening to. And the people the president was listening to were increasingly people who either had stayed silent or who were supportive of his war aims back in June. And as a result, the incentive structure was to never push back too hard against something that the president really wants to do.
Yeah, this is what's led us to where we are. I want to get to specific things that he's doing and play you some stuff from Trump in the last day or so. But before I do, I want to double back to something you were just talking about, and that is the superstructure of government in Iran. This is kind of what you just know so well. And you have written about the way in which the government isn't just it's top down, but you can lose the top and you still have all of these very powerful local administrations, if I can call them that administer and manage the country, even with the top gone.
Absolutely. Again, because this is a system. This is not a regime that is centered on a single individual. And as a result, dismantling a system is far, far more challenging and difficult than just taking out a specific individual. Even the previous regime in Iran, the Shah's regime, was much more similar to these one-man shows that you have elsewhere in the Middle East. Because taking out the Shah, once he fled, the whole thing just collapsed. Whereas this is a system, and they already had made decisions back in June after the Israelis assassinated a lot of their leaders, that they found replacements 5 layers down for each and every important position to make sure that whatever happened in terms of assassinations, they would not be slowed down, they would not lose command and control. They also decentralized decision-making tremendously, so that even if command and control is lost, commanders out in the field would still have the authority to pursue their strategies, but without necessarily getting constant approval from Tehran. They would be able to do so on their own. And this was all done precisely because they knew that the strategy of the United States and Israel would be to try to decapitate the regime from the top and think that everything would implode as a result of that. And we've seen quite the opposite. Even the killing of the supreme leader ended up, frankly, consolidating the regime. And they chose his son, which is quite surprising, but a decision that probably only was made because this was a wartime decision. Had the previous supreme leader died in a peacetime, the likelihood that his son would have taken over is actually very, very slim.
Yeah, I was just reading about that today. It's interesting that this chain of custody of Iran would have been very different had there not been this war. I want to ask you about, play me the cut 7, if you would, Tony, where Trump claims that all is well and everything's been decimated.
Then you have to absolutely love what I've done, because in 2 weeks we have decimated them. They have no Navy, they have no Air Force, they have no anti-aircraft weapons, they have no leadership. The leadership is gone. But then they set up a new leadership to go and name a new leader, and that leadership is gone. And now they think maybe the sun is gone. They're all gone. My biggest problem is I have no idea who we're talking to, because nobody ever heard of any of these people. They're all dead. But we did a job for the world, not a job for us, for the whole world. We took the worst country in 50 years and maybe longer from the ideological standpoint, a country that wanted to blow up the world, a country that is sick, and it has a religious fervor. And when you add religion, people don't realize more people died in religious wars than every other war put together.
He goes on for a while. I'll spare you. He's doing the dance that he always does. I mean, literally, he said that. I could play you sound after sound after sound of him saying exactly the same thing. The obliteration, the decimation of Iran. We've got them where we want them, and they just have to tap out. The reality is so different, I guess, clearly it would seem from anyone just reading in on this. But also you have contacts in Iran, you know what's happening there, and the reality is so very different both in the country and then, of course, when it comes to the leveraged choke points like the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, no, I think it's quite clear by now that Trump has lost control of this war. He did so already 2-3 days into the war, because Trump only came in with a plan A. The plan A was to take out the supreme leader and then expect that either the regime would implode or that they would surrender. Again, none of those things were really in the cards. So suddenly afterwards, they faced the reality of seeing that plan A didn't work and they didn't have a plan B, whereas the Iranians did have a plan and they've stuck to it. They're dramatically escalating and increasing the cost for the US and the entire global economy through their attacks on GCC states and on their attacks or their closing of the Strait of Hormuz. And that's frankly, for the first time, given the Iranians leverage in this equation in a manner that they haven't had for 3 years. And that's part of the reason I don't think the Iranians are actually going to agree to end this war unless they get concessions from the United States. For the first time, they have leverage, and as a result, from their standpoint, why would they give that up? But there's also another layer to this. Iran was attacked 8 months ago. Many of them on the Iranian side regret having accepted that ceasefire back in June. They think they should have continued at that time. And they're fearful that if they agree to a ceasefire prematurely at this point, and the war hasn't been costly enough for the US, that the US and Israel will be back in another 8 months and attacking them again, and they can't afford that. So they're going to continue this war until it becomes really, really costly to the US and Israel and the global economy in order to ensure that no one will try to do this again. And this is, again, one of those things that Trump completely miscalculated on.
Yeah, he's claiming out front that, the Iranians are begging for a ceasefire, for a negotiation. Play me cut 5, because here's what the Iranians are saying, at least through the official mouthpiece from Iran.
Has Iran asked for a ceasefire?
No, we never asked for a ceasefire, and we have never asked even for negotiation. We are ready to defend ourselves as long as it takes, and this is what we have done so far, and we continue to do that until President Trump comes to the point that this is an illegal war with no victory, and there are people being killed only because President Trump wants to have fun. This is what he has said.
Have fun?
We are not. Yes, this is what he said, that they are sinking, ships and targeting different places because it is fun. And the Secretary of War has said that there is no mercy. Mm-hmm. And this is actually a war crime. Even saying that is a war crime. So this is a war. This is a war of choice by President Trump and the United States, and we are going to continue our self-defense.
I mean, it's worth noting that he's not wrong. I mean, the statements of the Secretary of War, as he calls himself, the kind of frat boy, halftime speech that he was giving, where maximum lethality, no quarter. I mean, no quarter is a war crime, and they seem comfortable with that. But more to the point, what we were speaking of, hey, we're not asking for a ceasefire. We're not asking for a deal right now.
Yeah, as I said, and I think that was very clear after already day 3 or 4, the U.S. side had actually reached out to the Iranians twice minimum, trying to get a ceasefire, and we're stunned to find out that the Iranians rejected it. And again, the level of miscalculation, the level of problems caused by only speaking to proponents of war and only taking the advice of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is a key reason as to why we're here. If there had been a much more extensive approach here and talking to all kinds of different sources, including people inside the Trump administration who opposed this, who understood what this would do, we would not be here. But Trump really kind of was on that high. He thought that everyone who had told him, you can't kill Soleimani, you can't move the embassy, you can't recognize the Golan, you cannot bomb Fordo, you can't take out Maduro. I did all of those things. They were amazing successes. So I'm not going to listen to these naysayers any longer.
Yeah.
But then he chewed off something that was way, way bigger.
I love that you go back to his first administration with Soleimani, et cetera, with the movement of the embassy. These are all things, as you say, there were no repercussions for it. So in my last minute here, you make a point strategically that I think is significant as well. You made the point that I think you did this on your Substack. You were mentioning that Trump didn't hit the oil facilities on Karg Island in a way that would have completely decimated the Iran oil industry. And you could have brought the world to its knees from the standpoint of oil production. And your point, anyway, in that post, I'm looking down trying to find the post, but I can't right now, is that he had really figured out that he cannot escalate his way out of this conflict. That was your point.
I think it's become clear that at least that type of a military escalation would be very risky. Look, the US Navy is actually about 3,000 kilometers away from Iran because of the fact that the Iranians have missiles that can hit those ships, potentially sink an aircraft carrier. So the Navy has been kept at a very healthy distance. The airplanes are flying very long missions to bomb Iran with refueling halfway through, precisely because it's too dangerous to be in the Persian Gulf. So now we're saying we're going to move in with troops that will take an island, for instance, Karg Island. But that means that we're actually putting all of those troops at risk, as well as even if we take that island, the Iranians have a very easy target. It's right off of their coast. They can hit them with short-range missiles, with drones that would take no more than 15 minutes to reach them. So this is extremely risky, but precisely because of this, and the risk to the oil markets, of course, that I think that Trump has realized he doesn't have the same type of escalatory options that he had first thought.
And on some level, that also applies to protecting the Strait with American troops, yes?
Absolutely. I mean, this is why he's begging other countries to come in, but none of these countries were consulted about this decision. None of them are convinced that this was the right decision, and none of them are convinced that Trump has a plan.
Love our time. Thank you for making it. Trita Parsi, mad
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
I'll link to your Substack under this video. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Trita Parsi, everybody. Good stuff.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I thank you for being here. I will recommend, as I do, our coffee, Coachella Valley Coffee. They are the our longest sponsor, our official sponsor and partner. It is all organic, ethically sourced from women-owned farms, but were that just the case, I wouldn't rave about it as the best coffee on earth. I would just tell you that it's all organic and ethically sourced from women-owned farms. But I can also tell you it's the best coffee I've ever tasted. CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. There are coffee, teas, and spices there. They're so proud of the curation that they have done to get you the very best. And you get 10% off with our discount code MARKT when you order. Tasting profiles under everything. And so check it out. Order, enjoy, get the discount MARKT, and you will be back for more at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com. Next, I have the wonderful David Cay Johnston. So no one go anywhere.
The Mark Thompson Show.
It was great. I loved it.
How would you handle this? We could try ignoring it, sir.
Morning.
You cannot say you love your country.
Where are my weed smokers at? Stay at home and get baked.
Right on, everyone. He is one of the great public intellectuals in all the world, a Pulitzer Prize winner, co-founder of DCReport.org, now a professor at RIT, best-selling author, David Cay Johnston, everyone.
Hello, Mark.
Hello, sir. So much to talk about. I'll ask first for your state of the state on the Iran mess that Trump has walked into.
Oh, the war's going to be over in a week, 2 weeks. I mean, it's easy to do. We are in a real mess here. And what has happened is that Donald Trump spent a year denigrating all of our allies. Australia, the absolute most loyal lapdog ally the U.S. has. Canada, not even an important trading partner. They're our number one trading partner. The leaders of the EU countries and the NATO countries. And then he gets himself into this war that hasn't been thought through one bit, in which there's been no effort to provide communications gear, make contact with, and provide weaponry to young people who might be willing to take up arms against the theocracy. And so he goes to the NATO countries and he goes to Japan and South Korea and says, we really need you to come and help us. Send your warships so we can get oil out of the Strait of Hormuz. Every fifth barrel of oil moves through the Strait of Hormuz. And what do they tell him? Sorry, pal, that's your war. That's your problem. We're not getting drawn into this. Why? Because he attacked our friends. Donald keeps saying, oh, I've restored America's favoritism and dignity around the world. No, you haven't. You've made a mess of things. And what you're doing now is you're putting the U.S. on the road to becoming a pariah nation. Exactly what happened to South Africa in the last 10 years of apartheid, making us a pariah state.
This is such a good point you're making, because I've spoken about this in relation to Israel, but I think now you have the reputational damage to America that was done so quickly. And you could argue, even before this war, so much damage had been done that it might have been tough to, recuperate. But this really does put it over the top. I want to play for David cut 1, which is a bit from the UK Parliament as they talk about this. And you get a sense of where they are. Yeah, go ahead.
Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for advance sight of his statement for my security briefing. Once again, President Trump has launched a unilateral and unlawful act. Ayatollah Khamenei was a brutal dictator and a monstrous war criminal. He supported Hamas and their October the 7th atrocities, and he massacred thousands of his own people for daring to protest against decades of repression. I shed no tears for him. But instead, I think of all the innocent Iranian civilians who have lost their lives. I think of the US service personnel killed in action, our allies and partners in the region who are being outrageously targeted by Iran, and our British bases which have already faced attack. They did not choose this war. Donald Trump did, and he will bear responsibility for it. We have seen before what happens when an American president launches an illegal war with no idea how or when it is going to end, and we fear for what comes next. So in discussions with the White House, has the Prime Minister demanded to find out what Trump's plan is for what comes next? Does the Prime Minister understand that when he fails to stand up to Trump, especially when he breaks international law, it makes our country less safe? And how will the Prime Minister be sure that defensive operations from UK bases will not become offensive? And in rightly protecting our allies in the region, can we be assured by the Prime Minister that he won't follow Trump's lead down a slippery slope into a protracted conflict?
So there you have it, David. I mean, and it really echoes like Iraq, doesn't it?
Yeah, and where is Prime Minister Hugh Grant when we need him? Which if you haven't seen Love Actually, you won't get. But it's, I think this is largely the opinion of other democratic societies. You got into this, you didn't have a plan, you don't know what you're doing, you're not doing America first, you're doing, oh, is that what you want, Prime Minister Netanyahu? Why, sure, America will follow you. And there's no strategy here. They haven't armed people who might rise up against the government, and the Iranian government has an absolute monopoly on mechanical violence, guns and weaponry in Iran. They didn't supply people with communications gear. Some of the young people who want to overthrow the theocracy are going to now defend it because they want to defend their country. And your previous guest talked about Karg Island. This is an island right off the shore of Iran, which is used for transferring fossil fuels. All right, so we bombed the hell out of it. Now you want to go and take it physically? Why? What do you want to take it for? Because then you're sitting ducks. And so these people have no idea what they are doing. And remember, Trump dismissed all sorts of senior counterintelligence people, especially those who were working on Iran. He dismissed various generals who were experts in these issues. And so we have a government now run by, the hard-drinking Pete Hegseth, who thinks war is about maximum lethality and has no understanding whatsoever of how civilized nations engage in warfare. We have a bunch of quislings in the Republican Party on Capitol Hill who will not defend the Constitution. They are violating their oath of office every single minute. They fail to stand up for the Constitution and point out that this war is illegal. And we had two big developments today, Mark. Jack Kent, who was the head of the Center for Counterterrorism, resigned. Joe Kent resigned as a matter of principle. And he said on his way out the door, there was no imminent threat from Iran. And of course there wasn't. A, they don't have nuclear weapons. According to Donald, we obliterated their capacity. Not true, but it says his claim. And B, they don't have a delivery mechanism. The furthest they apparently can send a missile is Cyprus, right off the shore of Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. I mean, they may not even be able to reach Greece. They're not a threat to us. And that's the only justification without a declaration of war for doing what Trump has done, is that this was to deal with an imminent threat. And
yeah, this is David, I was just going to mention that Joe Kent is a huge Trumpie. I mean, he ran for Congress. He is Mr. Donald Trump. He's an election denier. He's a J6er. He's like for him to resign is extraordinary.
Yeah, it just tells you that Donald Trump is a lying liar who lies when the truth would help him, because he doesn't know what the truth and what a lie is. He makes this stuff he just makes it up in his head. And then the second thing that's happening is Trump turning us into a pariah on the world stage because of this. And that's going to have profound consequences for trade deals, which we're already seeing. Canada making trade deals with China that Trump's complained about, as if Canada is supposed to bow down to him. We've lost probably forever the whole soybean business in the Midwest, where China bought most of it. And in the process, under America First, we're putting Brazilian, Argentinian, Australian, and Canadian soybean farmers first, because these people have no idea what they're doing. This is amateur hour deluxe. It's a bunch of seventh graders running our government. And people need to wake up to this, and they need to demand that Congress say, no, we're not giving you any more money for this. I don't expect that's going to happen. And so far, the Democrats are doing what they always do. Instead of visceral points, Donald Trump has no business being president. He doesn't know what he's doing. It's, well, you need to understand the history of this. And by the way, there's a strategy, and just blah, 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 blah.
I think the issue may be forced a bit on the economy. The appropriations you're talking about, the supplemental appropriations, that's going to be huge. But as you've kind of intimated, it likely will somehow get through. I think they're talking about a reconciliation or something like that to get it past any kind of blockage on the part of the Democrats. But play cut 3 for David. This is The Economist talking about the oil prices and the rebound that Donald Trump keeps talking about. You know, it's a short-term pain for long-term gain. Believe me, it's going to be back to, prices will be lowered. And the reality is that the tail on this stuff is way, way long. Go ahead.
Truth Social. He said short-term oil prices, which will drop rapidly when the destruction of the Iran nuclear threat is over, is a very small price to pay for USA and world safety and peace only. Only fools would think differently. He seems to think this will end quickly. Prices will go down again.
Our sources in the oil industry are telling us that it's going to take quite a while to get the production up and running again. And in the United States, producers don't want to start production and do production, increase production until they know they have a good 6 months of higher oil prices to justify the break-evens, which are now higher and more expensive than they once were, to do more production in the United States as well. There's also a risk premium that we're likely to see even after the Strait of Hormuz is open, and that will linger on oil prices. They may come down, but they're going to be coming down from a higher plateau, and that means still very high prices rippling through the global economy, but through the U.S. economy as well.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, so there you have it. You know, a risk premium, the break-even point is higher. All of these things are working even if the war were to end in 5 minutes, you know.
Well, this morning, the head of the International Energy Agency announced that the member countries unanimously agreed to release oil from their strategic petroleum reserves. 400 million barrels. Now, that sounds like a huge number, 400 million barrels. Daily world consumption of oil is about 102 million barrels. So we're talking about a half a week's supply, basically. The total strategic petroleum reserves in the world work out to be about 2 weeks' supply. And you can be sure that China, which has the bulk of it, is not, and I've written about years how the Chinese have been building up their oil reserves. They're not going to share that with the rest of the world. This is an economic opportunity for them. Another example of how Donald Trump is advancing the interests of the communist dictatorship in Beijing against the interests of Americans at every level in every kind of job.
Well, and of course, the Russians get immediate tariff relief because of this, and the price of oil is all of a sudden going to bring in incredible wealth.
And here's the question that isn't being asked by journalists in Washington, and it isn't being asked by leaders on Capitol Hill. There is now numerous, I shouldn't say numerous, but multiple credible news reports that the Russians are helping the Iranians target American service members to kill them. And that's what war is about. War is about killing and seizing real estate. And so what does Donald Trump do? Does he call up Vladimir Putin and say, you want worse sanctions, pal? You don't give any intelligence to the Iranians that directs at Americans, civilian or in uniform. No, he grants them, as their economy is really on the edge of a total collapse, this opportunity to rake in foreign currency that they desperately need. I mean, Russia's been reduced to barter to bring in food because they're not growing enough food to feed themselves. This huge country with all this farmland can't do it. And Trump is rewarding a country that is targeting American servicemen for death. Whatever else you think about the war, I mean, ask yourself, what if Barack Obama had done that? There would be an impeachment vote today for him doing that. Where are the journalists asking that question? Where's Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, who's on the Armed Services Committee, Mark Warner, who's on the Intelligence Committee? Where are the Republicans on this issue? And the fact is, everybody is either running scared or they're off into some intellectual pointy-headed language where, my fellow professors will get the message and the average American isn't going to understand it all.
Right. I think they're trying to avoid the tip of the spear. I mean, I really think they're frightened. Play for David play him cut 10, if you would, please, on the Obama nuclear deal. He tore up the nuclear deal, did Trump. He couldn't tell you one thing in it, I'm sure, but it had Obama's name on it. That's all he needed to know to tear it up. And so, he peacocks about that, but here he is now trying to forge his own nuclear deal, but of course, no one's talking.
If I didn't terminate Barack Hussein Obama's Iran nuclear deal, you would right now, Israel would be gone, it would be incinerated, and probably the Middle East likewise. And remember, they have all of those missiles. And I heard they were sending missiles to UAE. I said, that's strange. UAE is like the banker for Iran. They're like the banker. Qatar, their neighbors, they got along okay. Saudi Arabia. All of a sudden, Kuwait is getting hit. Bahrain is getting, all these countries are getting hit. There was no expert that would say that was going to happen. It's not a question of gee, should you have known? And if we did know, big deal. I mean, we have to do what we have to do. But we hit them so hard like nobody's ever been hit. We hit them very hard. And we've extinguished most of their missiles. We've extinguished most of their drones. We've extinguished most of the places where the missiles and the drones are built. We've fully extinguished 2 layers of leadership and probably a third, if you believe some stories. So we only have one thing, to have a little choke point, and they've used it very well for years, but it doesn't work. But I think this, if some of these countries that we've been good to for years, and maybe more important than that, some of these countries that get 90% and 95% of their energy from Hormuz, the Strait. Hormuz, a famous, wonderful, beautiful place But you wouldn't want to be necessarily sailing a boat there right now?
I would not.
Okay, you know why? Not because of them, because of us. Because we've taken out their entire Navy. We've taken out every one of their drone, they call it a drone layer.
Yeah, and then he just goes back out and repeat, we've taken out. But there's a lot there, but David, go ahead.
The level of absolute ignorance about the Middle East in what he said is astonishing. First of all, the Saudis in particular, but the Bahrainis, the UAE, they're all afraid of the Iranians. Iran's leadership is Shiite Muslim. Those countries are Sunni Muslim. They all have large minorities of Shia Muslims who've been oppressed all these years. And, the head of the government in Saudi Arabia is no better than Ayatollah Khamenei or Khamenei's son. He's just as ruthless and cold-blooded and dictatorial and murderous as they are. And Trump doesn't know any of this. He is completely ignorant about the situation. And the UAE is not the banker. I mean, among other ridiculous statements. The other day, he also said, and maybe you have the clip where he said, well, Qatar and Iran, you can just walk and in 1 second be in the other country. Right. No, it's about 120 miles of water that separate the two of them. He doesn't know anything. He's appallingly ignorant. And now we're into this war. And let's assume that Trump just declares victory and backs off. The Iranians aren't going to see it that way. All they can do is harry these other countries. The Iranians are not going to be able to go conquer Saudi Arabia. They don't particularly want to do that. But they are not and cannot conquer these other countries, and they haven't tried to. And his statement that Israel would have been incinerated, most basic element of understanding nuclear weapons, which, by the way, President Obama, when he was a college student, that was his senior thesis at Harvard. They are defensive weapons. If Ukraine had not given up its nuclear weapons and turned them over to Russia, they would not have been invaded. If the Tehran regime, awful as it is, was to nuke even some small part of Israel, the retaliation would have wiped Tehran off the face of the earth. This is an absolute fantasy by people who don't have a clue about these issues. And now we've dismissed the very best people in our military, in our diplomatic corps, in the White House intelligence services, and we've replaced them with people like Tulsi Gabbard, who is completely unfit for that job, the hard-drinking Pete Hegseth, who demonstrates every day his utter incompetence and his disrespect for our troops.
The Hegseth cut, play that for David, because it speaks to the Strait of Hormuz situation and that they never blink in claiming that they've had everything figured out since the very beginning. Nothing is happening that they didn't anticipate. But in his both verbiage and manner, you can see the lie on full display. Go ahead.
Yeah, right here. Mr. Secretary, you have said that the U.S. military has essentially aerial superiority, naval superiority over Iran, yet we're not escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. Why? How did you not plan for this?
We planned for it. We recognize it because ultimately we want to do it sequentially in a way that makes the most sense for what we want to achieve and ensure that we're sending the right signals to the world when we do so. So when Chris Wright speaks or we speak, it's based on a full assessment of what we're up against, what we want to say to the world, how that we want them to see and understand the conflict. It's like this whole idea of the war widening. That's what the press wants to make it look like it's widening and chaos is ensuing. No, we're actually closing in on grabbing hold of and controlling what objectives we want to achieve and how we want to achieve them. It's called shaping operations and setting the conditions. But when you shape the environment, you don't always tell. I mean, foolish political leaders and foolish military leaders of the past will hang an exact deadline on it. Or here's exactly when we'll do what we're going to do. Or here's how long it's going to take us. And then if you meet that, maybe you meet it. But if you don't, you fail. And if you're far beyond, we know exactly what we're shaping and why. We're sending those signals working across the interagency. The Strait of Hormuz is something we've paid attention to from the beginning. And the American people can rest assured we will ensure that our interests are advanced.
I feel like if he was one of your students, you would go, just sit down. Just sit down and read the material, and we'll talk about this tomorrow.
I can understand why you would think that. It's not my style, but I understand why you would think that. But first of all, he says, these foolish people, I mean, we have to always denigrate other people. We can't assume that they had any sense or decency, that they set deadlines. No, it's Donald Trump, who said, the war will be over in 4 or 5 weeks. Now, the fact is that if this war goes on for another 2 weeks, which brings us to April 1, oil prices are going to rise to levels we have never seen. And Diane Swank, a very good economist, was quite right in the clip you played that American domestic drillers are not going to put the money into drilling rigs because of the uncertainty of this. Well, what if it does suddenly end? And we've put all this money into drilling for oil. The idea that prices are going to fall back to where they were, no. And by the way, gasoline prices would have risen this month and next anyway, because now is when we put ethanol, this totally useless product, keeps the corn growers happy in Iowa, into gasoline. So oil prices, gasoline prices always go up a tick in the spring. But this is just madness. Now, one thing he said is true. We have war gamed this issue of what happens if we get into an entanglement with Iran 16 ways to heaven. I asked somebody who was involved in the war gaming business in the Pentagon once, have we ever war gamed a nuclear exchange between Santiago and Buenos Aires? And his answer was, yeah. I mean, he may not quite literally have made it true, but it wasn't a crazy question. And so, yeah, we've war gamed this stuff, but they didn't do that for this war. And when time passes and we begin to read the books from the civilian advisors and the retired admirals and generals, you're going to find out that this is a seat of the pants war. That's not the way you do this, by the seat of the pants. That's why the Europeans are all pulling back. The Japanese are not going to help us. The South Koreans aren't going to help us. The Australians aren't going to help us because, you don't know what you're doing. You have no idea. And now there is serious talk. There's more coverage out of the Washington press corps that we're going to go in with ground troops. Well, 91 million people in that country, people fight to defend their country, even if they hate the regime, and 1 million trained soldiers. And Trump also said, I don't know if it was in one of the clips you played, but I sometime today heard him say that we've destroyed almost all of their drones. No, apparently the assessments by militaries in other countries are that they have tens of thousands of drones and they can build them as fast as you can imagine.
Well, the statements that Trump's made about decimating this and destroying that, there you can just completely forget about that. I mean, he reminds me of Baghdad Bob, the guy who was out there in front of the Iraq War and talking about how we've got the Americans on the run. Meanwhile, the Americans had taken over the airport. They were right outside the palace gates. I mean, it was incredible. Trump really is that. And to your point about boots on the ground, this reminds me, David, frankly, of Vietnam, when you had a very small group of American troops going in, first advisors, then, and before you know it, you have 50,000 guys dead. I mean, it's just, it really is.
Follies in Vietnam where the generals would just lie through their teeth about what was going on. John Van's book, A Bright Shining Lie, is really the best to capture this willingness to just lie and falsify and make claims that have no factual basis. And that's exactly what's going on here. If you want to work for Donald Trump in a high-level position, the first thing you have to do is check your reputation at the door, and you have to be willing to lie for the boss. And even when you do, the boss may turn on you whenever it becomes convenient, just convenient for him to lie for you.
Yeah, so well said. I only have another minute or two, but I want to quickly ask you about Cuba. Play me cut 14, if you would, please. This is Trump talking about the honor there would be in running Cuba, and he's looking forward to that honor.
You believe I'll be having the honor of taking Cuba? That'd be good honor. It's a big honor.
Taking Cuba.
Taking Cuba in some form, yeah. Taking Cuba. I mean, whether I free it, take it, I think I could do anything I want with it. You want to know the truth?
Speak to that, please, David.
The president of the United States doesn't have the authority to do that. International law says that's a monstrous thing to do. Can we take Cuba? Oh, yeah, especially now that they have no oil. So what's happening because we cut off all their oil? Well, imagine that you are on insulin, which you have to keep refrigerated, assuming you can get it into the country or they make it there, which is unlikely. You're going to die because there's no refrigeration. The hospitals can't work, sewage treatment plants. Nothing's going to work without energy. So can we send a small contingent of Marines into Havana Harbor and take over? Yeah. Oh, yeah. But there's no morality in Donald's statements. Cuba is a sovereign nation. We don't like who's running it. I don't like who's running it. I didn't like who ran it before either, the Batista regime. But that's not the point. Cubans get to decide these things. And we should never forget that the Cuban exiles, including Marco Rubio's family, who want us to do the work and have American boys from Montana and Maine go down there, they were unwilling after the Bay of Pigs to put up the life of a single one of their children or grandchildren. These were the people who got rich off the Batista regime that stole from the people famously left and right. And that's why the people overthrew that regime. And they want the rest of us to pay the bill for something they were unwilling to try and do themselves. They're like Donald. They're rich cowards. They're rich and spineless. And I'm sure you're going to get some email from people saying, why, do I hate Cubans? I don't. I just don't think that my grandsons, who are draft age, should have to go fight a war in Cuba on behalf of people who were so cowardly that for more than 65 years, they allowed this communist regime and they didn't on their own take action to take back their country. And by the way, I don't think they could have. I don't think they had the popular support to do so.
I was in Havana twice, and they're a beautiful people, but they have been oppressed for a long time. And I think that after a while, you kind of self-oppress. You know what I mean? You talk yourself into the fact that, revolution or any kind of pushback is just too hard.
Revolutions, internal revolutions, real revolutions occur when young men look around and decide that the unknown future is worse than the known future. Is better than the known future. We know what the future is going to be. It can't be worse if we overthrow the government. And that's not yet the case with enough people in Iran. Angry as younger people are about living under a regime that basically wants 9th century Islam. If you study Islam, the 9th century is a crucial period in its cultural and theocratic development. There's not enough of them to overthrow the government, but we didn't do anything to prepare them. We didn't send them communications gear. We didn't make friends. We didn't connect them with people. And this is a complete amateur show. 100% incompetent amateurs.
I think the last thing I'd say, David, is the soft power, which was so much the strength of America, from the very first hours of this administration, they began to unplug it, with USAID.
Donald Trump has ruined our reputation around the world. Burning food rather than sending it to starving people. Once you paid for it, it's there. Burning medications. It tells you that this is an administration led by a man with no regard for anyone. Donald Trump will throw Melania under the bus if he needs to save his skin. The only person he will have difficulty doing that with is his daughter, Ivanka. That's it. And nobody else in the world. It doesn't matter because you're not a human being. You're an object to either advance his interests or to stand in the way of them. And I don't know what it's going to take to get John Thune and Mike Johnson and some of the other Republican leaders to stop acting as Donald Trump's personal servants and to uphold their oaths to the Constitution. More than 1 million people have died for this country. And these people are so cowardly, they will not risk losing a primary election. They will not risk the wrath of Donald Trump. They are despicable. They are cowards. They are quislings. And we should shame them every opportunity we have.
It is a stunning thing. And David's written about the making of Donald Trump, actually in a book called The Making of Donald Trump, but also in several books. I'll link to them under this video. If you want to, you can, as I've mentioned before, needle drop any of the books, and they're just really, they're revelations about Trump himself. Thank you, David. Appreciate you always.
Take
care. All right, David Cay Johnston, everybody. Right on.
The Mark Thompson Show.
This is Mark Thompson.
Glad to have everybody in. I am going to update a couple of huge stories that have broken just of the moment. One of them is that Pam Bondi has been subpoenaed by Congress. Yeah, and you'll never believe what she was subpoenaed over. The Epstein investigation. House Oversight Committee Chair James Comer issuing the subpoena today. It requires Bondi to appear for a deposition on April 14th. Comer wrote that the committee believes Bondi possesses valuable insight, that's a quote, into the investigation surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. The subpoena comes after 5 Republicans on the committee joined all Democrats to vote to call on Bondi to testify. That happened earlier this month. Senate Democrats are issuing their latest offer to fund the Department of Homeland Security now as well. They've issued that offer to the White House. They vowed to block funding until the administration agrees to immigration enforcement reforms, even though there's been pushback from Republicans. The shutdown, of course, long lines at airport security checkpoints. TSA workers are going without pay. Alabama Senator Tommy Tuberville appears to be standing by a recent social media post that he made linking New York City Mayor Mamdani to the September 11th, 2001 attacks. The post showed photos of the exploding World Trade Center in New York alongside Mamdani holding Ramadan iftar in City Hall with the caption, "The enemy is inside the gates." When questioned by reporters, Tuberville chuckled before saying, quote, "I just go by his rhetoric." And he downplayed whether the remarks were actually offensive. Tuberville emphasized that he does not care what people's religious backgrounds are. He expressed opposition against attempts to push another culture onto the American public. So that's a bit of what's happening in the world just today. I am struck by the fact that we have a guy in the presidency who both opines on hugely important things like the mess in Iran, the war of choice that he began, and yet devolves as he riffs and talks about things in all of these weird ways. One of the ways he devolved was in revealing the health condition of a member of Congress who I guess is has a fatal cancer diagnosis. Do you have that, Tony? No? Yeah, where was that, Kim? I thought we had that. But maybe, if not, I will share this while they look for that. The cut 17, as he talks about the Kennedy Center, spoke a lot about Iran at the front end, maybe 7 minutes on Iran, but mostly on the Kennedy Center and how it seems to just be falling down and needs a spruce up. And then you really see where his comfort zone is, Donald Trump. It's in choosing curtains and picking out construction materials. Cut 17.
Run it because we wanted to see. And if you remember when we first took it over, I didn't do it with enthusiasm. I did it because somebody had to do it, had to turn it around because it was failing. It would have closed, and physically it would have almost fallen down. It was in very bad shape. The steel columns outside, as an example, were meant to be covered. You know, exposed steel is unusual to have in building. What I do best in life is build. I build buildings really well. and really and under budget and ahead of schedule. That's what I do. Unlike the Fed building, which is going to cost billions of dollars. It may never open.
Yeah. The speaking of things that are costing billions of dollars. Oh, here he is. He continues. Sorry.
I mean, right now, we have a wonderful Kevin, a wonderful new head of the Fed coming in. I don't know if he'll ever be able to occupy this complex that was destroyed by Jerome Too Late Powell. I call him too late because he's always too late with interest. Should cut interest rates. He should cut them right now. They should have a special meeting. What's a better time to cut interest rates than now? A third grade student would know that. But that's a terrible thing. But what I do is I build great stuff. And what we're going to do is, right outside. In fact, if you look behind me, see the nice gold curtains? If you want to look into a nice foundation and you want to see a lot of work, very deep, very, very deep for specific reasons, we have a magnificent ballroom being built because this is the biggest room and it holds like 98 people for dinner. But behind me, you're going to have a ballroom that this building and the people occupying it, in particular, every president for 150 years has clamored for a ballroom.
Again, I remind you, we have a 5-alarm fire going on in Iran, and he is riffing quite comfortably about the ballroom and the Kennedy Center. And then he talks about a lawmaker who apparently is dealing with a diagnosis that is pretty grim. Here is, you can hit that full screen thing. Maybe that would help. There you go. I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. Now I sound like Trump. You could hit that full screen, or maybe not. All right.
Don is a real champion and a patriot because he's still coming to work. And Congressman Neil Dunn of Florida had some real health challenges, and it was very serious, and had a pretty grim diagnosis. And I mentioned it to the president, and I said, Congressman Dunn is a real champion and a patriot because he's still coming to work. And if others got this diagnosis, they would be apt to go home and retire. And
what was the diagnosis?
It was, I think it was a terminal diagnosis.
He would be dead by June.
Okay, that wasn't public, but yeah, okay. That's it was grim. That's what I was going to say. I don't think
with a heart problem, by the way. This was a heart problem.
So the long story short, the president called him.
Yeah. Long story short, we don't have any of your medical records, Mr. President, but you can't wait to reveal those of another lawmaker. In any case, that's the latest from Trump. It's a remarkable fact that Trump continues in control, and I thought David Cay Johnston said it so well, in total control of those in Congress who fear him. It's just that simple. They fear him. That's why it took such great guts. This again, the story that we gave you at the beginning of the show, and I mentioned it again in relation to David Cay Johnston, the Joe Kent resignation. He's the National Counterterrorism Center director, and he's a huge Trumpy, this guy Joe Kent. He's run for Congress before. He not only resigned from an administration that he was quite dedicated to, and again, he was cleared at the highest levels of security, heading up this counterterrorism center. But the other thing is that he knows what's going to happen to him. And that is, he will be rotisseried by this administration. They'll put the FBI on him. They'll put the IRS on him. They will do to him what they do to those who they view as disloyal. So that is the other, as I say, commendable aspect to what Joe Kent did. But also it's worth remembering that those who are perceived as disloyal by this administration, they face similar narratives that will likely ruin them politically, potentially ruin them financially, and ruin them from a career standpoint. So that's how he keeps everybody in line also. I think that's worth remembering too. I want to read some comments, and then I have
And now, your comments.
I have a chunk of Trump coming up also. First, a super sticker. Thank you. You know, we're an independent show. We need crowd funding, and so when somebody in the crowd funds us, we give them a big shout out. Yeah. Thanks to everybody who funds us through Patreon and PayPal. You're our real heroes. Without you, we couldn't plan month to month. This is Lynn Shamshoyan. My favorite Shamshoyan is Lynn with a $10 super sticker. And Hegseth isn't, I'm sorry. You go ahead, Kim. Yeah, thank you. The Last Angry Manny says, Hormuz isn't very straight. It's very crooked. I get it, because it's not a straight. Is that it? Last Angry Manny? Is that it? Hegseth heard Strait of Hormuz, so he went straight for more booze, says Nullifidian. All right, I'll give you
Big
a
shout out.
that for a $2 super chat. Thank you for having awesome guests, says Maud Day. Yeah. Big, good guest day for sure. Thank you, Maud. I think Trump's buddy Putin is making money hand over fist and will have billions of dollars to use to carry on the war in Ukraine. Yeah, and that's the gloomy Maine Coon is right. I mean, that's something that we've talked about. The fact that now with sanction relief, you've got a country that had been teetering now with a huge influx of revenue in Russia we're talking about. Amalia? Is that who that would be, Kim? Amalia, maybe?
Big shout out.
Big shout out. Okay, $2.
I'd say Amalia's.
Yeah.
Amalia's.
Or Amalia's?
Amalia's 888. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard Delamater saying, did you know that ICE killed another person yesterday? Well, someone died in ICE custody. Is that what you mean? Because I had that story yesterday and we covered it yesterday, but I don't know if there was someone else that you were referring to. Mayor Mamdani was 9 in 2001. Thank you, Nancy Boyd, for pointing that out. Yeah, the idea that you could somehow draw any connection between Mamdani and 9/11, crazy, man, crazy. But that's sort of the crazy that we live in. Yeah. So thank you for your comments. Thank you for your super stickers. Love all of it. And I must tell you,
The Mark Thompson Show.
Speaking of love, there is no love like the love I have for Sweet 106 Bakery. I am an addict. It's for real, man. You try it and you tell me if it doesn't change your life. Sweet106bakery.com is where you find these incredible confections. Christy has won Cupcake Wars twice. She's won it twice. The second time against like 50 other champions. So she's come up with this. It's a small business that bakes in small batches, and then they send out, based on your order, in these containers, these wonderful, wonderful creations. Grab them with 15% off at checkout. Use Mark T. Suite, like a suite of rooms, SUITE, sweet106bakery.com. Mark T at checkout. Again, they've come up with some great new flavors. The Dubai chocolate. The orange chiffon is insane. And so you'll get a layered cupcake in that container. It's not just one cupcake. It's 1.5 cupcakes. That's the mini. And then the regular is 3, isn't it? 3 cupcakes, Kim, in the normal size, or is it 3.5?
It's 3.5 in the normal size.
3.5 in the normal size. So if you get the mini, it's 1.5, 3.5 for the normal, and so it's almost like a layer cake, and you can eat it with a spoon out of the. It's
so amazing,
it's divine. I
and
mean,
it's the amazing thing is, sometimes it's the frosting bites on the edges that are the best. No, in this case, every bite is as amazing as the last bite, all the way down to the bottom of the little pint container. It's so good.
Yeah,
I've never seen anything like it.
It's really something special. You must. What Kim's talking about is the balance between the cake and the icing is just perfect. All right, Sweet 106 Bakery. Use our code MARKT at checkout and you'll get 15% off. Sweet106bakery.com.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm so excited. I mentioned Pete Hegseth before. I wanted to play a little bit of something that, we talked about how he spent millions on like shrimp cocktail and lobster tails at the Pentagon. We had that story. Literally millions of dollars spent on this. But I liked a little run that Katie Couric did on this, and she kind of details this as well. So give a listen, and shout out to Katie.
Is back in the hot seat, this time for spending almost $100 billion in September of 2025 on luxury items for the Defense Department. Yes, in just 1 month. Those purchases include $98,000 on a Steinway grand piano for the Air Force Chief of Staff's home, $2 million on Alaskan king crab, and $7 million worth of lobster tail, which is apparently a favorite at the department. Open the Books, the government watchdog which broke the news, has been tracking Defense Department spending for nearly a decade, and September 2025 was record-setting. Part of the problem is that the Department of Defense, like most federal agencies, has a use it or lose it spending policy, meaning at the end of the fiscal year, officials have a spending spree so they don't end up with reduced budgets. One person quoted in the report compares September 30th to the government's Amazon Prime Day. But their everything must go mentality is being spent in some pretty concerning ways. $225 million on furniture, $15.1 million for ribeye steak, $124,000 for ice cream machines, $12,540 on 3-tiered fruit basket stands, $139,000 on 272 orders of donuts, $26,000 for sushi preparation tables, $26,000 on a violin, $22,000 on a custom handmade flute from the luxury Japanese brand Muramatsu. Not that we needed to put all of this in perspective, but as a reminder, in October, the administration said it couldn't fund SNAP benefits, and Trump called for the military budget to be raised to $1.5 trillion in 2027, up from $900 billion in 2026. For those of you who were sentient back in the 80s, you may remember the $600 toilet seat scandal. The Pentagon didn't literally buy a normal toilet seat for $600. It was a specialized one for a specific aircraft bathroom. But the incident exposed broader problems with wasteful defense spending. Fast forward 40 years, and that story pales in comparison to what we're seeing here.
Yeah, it's interesting, too, that I mentioned this at the time when Doge was doing, it was a fraud, Doge. We all knew it was a fraud. We talked about it as a fraud. It was utter BS. They deputized these late teen, early 20, tech pro wannabes and let them run roughshod over the U.S. government. It was the most insane thing I'd ever seen. Not approved by anyone, not even background checked by anyone. These kids went in and laid people off and then scraped government databases for information on taxpayers and voters, and Google it. It's all over the place. They don't know where that information is. But the reason it's relevant here is that Doge didn't do one thing. All about waste, fraud, and abuse. You're not for waste, fraud, and abuse. How could you not be for cutting waste, fraud, and abuse? We want to cut waste, fraud, and abuse, but we don't do what? Cross the Potomac to the Pentagon. There is no waste in Washington like the waste you'll find at the Pentagon. And that's just on defense systems that you overpay for. But what was there in that little run was all the ways in which the government is living like it was like the Sweet 16 birthday that you had tens of millions of dollars to celebrate with. It's insane. I mean, I don't even know how you justify any of those expenditures. It's utter madness. There isn't a hip-hop video that has the kind of decadence associated with that expenditure that we've just heard. It's an absolute outrage that the Pentagon could spend that kind of money and that Congress can just sit there as they do always with Pentagon spending, and just go, it's the Pentagon. Also, it coexists with, as mentioned, all of these cutbacks in SNAP, in all of these public education programs. I mean, now there's going to be another supplemental appropriation for this war in Iran. All of this while they're partying like rock stars at the Pentagon on your dime. It's an absolute affront to any kind of budgetary responsibility. That's what's happening in Washington. The two top Democrats on the House and Senate Judiciary Committee are referring Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, now on her way out, referring her to the Department of Justice for perjury because of her testimony to congressional committees earlier this month. This is a letter that was sent to Attorney General Pam Bondi, who, as I mentioned, she herself was subpoenaed to testify that for next month because of the Jeffrey Epstein file handling. Dick Durbin of Illinois and Jamie Raskin alleging that Noem's statements on a variety of topics, including DHS and whether or not DHS followed judges' orders, and a controversial multi-million-dollar ad campaign that went, as you'll recall, with a no-bid award to people connected to her, appear to violate criminal statutes prohibiting perjury and knowingly making false statements to Congress. That continues as Gregory Bovino. Remember him? He led the Minnesota operation. He was demoted in January as head of that deadly immigration crackdown in Minneapolis. Well, he is retiring at the end of March. He's had enough.
Good day, sir.
Exactly. He announced his retirement in an interview with Breitbart. It was weeks after agents fatally shot the 37-year-old U.S. citizen Alex Peretti and Renee Good in separate cases in January that he said, I'll be leaving the Minnesota area. He joined the Border Patrol in 1996, spent most of his career in California's El Centro sector, and then he was tapped to run the Trump administration's plans in Minnesota. He will be retiring. Homeland Security Advisor Stephen Miller saying that people who don't belong here, they're the ones responsible for the United States' growing national debt. This is an executive order signing to address supposed fraud within federal programs. They're really concentrating on blue states. They feel blue states have been perpetrators of all this fraud. He attributed the debt to undocumented immigrants who receive Medicaid benefits and emergency care at hospitals. What we found since President Trump came into office, he said, is that the Democrats have set up the system to funnel hundreds of billions of dollars and ultimately trillions of dollars. These guys throw around numbers, and people just go, oh, billions, trillions, okay. That the Democrats have set up a system to funnel hundreds of billions and ultimately trillions of dollars to migrants, Miller said. He said that the U.S. immigration and enforcement agents have asked a group of detained immigrants whether or not they were on Medicaid, and, quote, half of them raised their hands and volunteered that they were on Medicaid. The absurdity of this is manifest. It is just manifest. They are not getting federal benefits in any numbers that matter, not billions and not trillions. So, a bizarre series and cluster of facts greet us today. Bovino, the perjury charge to Noem, and Stephen Miller talking about the debt really falling at the feet of illegal immigrants. Bank of America has reached a non-binding settlement in the suit alleging that it aided Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. It was a class action complaint filed in October of last year. It said that Bank of America, quote, knowingly provided financial support and the veneer of institutional legitimacy to Jeffrey Epstein and ignored suspicious transactions by Epstein. The notice on the case docket said that lawyers for the bank and the victims reached a settlement in principle. Terms of the settlement not immediately disclosed, and they will need to be approved by a federal judge. I have in my possession materials related to a chunk of Trump. And I'd like to do that chunk of Trump before we say goodbye. Do I have the blessing of you, Kim?
As long as you leave me with a minty taste at the end of this whole thing, I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
I will. All right. Let's.
Kim, how are you?
Let me do a chunk of Trump first.
Yeah.
And then I'll do the minty taste.
Okay.
All right.
I like it.
You asked for it. You've got it. This is your chunk of Trump.
Open wide.
Ready?
Here comes your chunk of Trump.
It's my favorite food.
With your first bite, here's Mark Thompson.
I have a feeling it's going to be beautiful.
If you missed it, I'm going to tell you about it again. President Trump publicly revealing a Republican lawmaker's private health diagnosis. I'm laughing because the guy is so completely cloaked in secrecy when it comes to his own medical situation. We don't know anything. I mean, guy's got all this bruising. He's got a thing on his neck. He's huffing and puffing, wandering up the red carpet in Alaska. MRIs, what are they for? I don't know. But when it comes to other people's information, man, he just cracks it open. He publicly revealed a Republican lawmaker's private health diagnosis, saying that Florida Representative Neil Dunn faced a terminal illness and that he had helped him get life-saving care because he liked him, but also because he needed his vote. Yes. That is the most Trump thing ever. Dunn is 73, announcing in January he's not going to seek re-election in his midterm elections, made no mention of his health at that time. In February, his spokesperson said that the congressman would finish out the rest of his current term despite some speculation that he would leave office early. Trump's remarks came at a White House event to discuss the Kennedy Center. He was sitting next to House Speaker Mike Johnson. And Trump said, he brought up the fact that one lawmaker was very ill. It looked like he wasn't going to make it, in fact, Trump said. And here it is.
Thank you, Mr. President. Congressman Neil Dunn of Florida had some real health challenges, and it was very serious, and had a pretty grim diagnosis. And I mentioned it to the president, and I said, Congressman Dunn is a real champion and a patriot because he's still coming to work. And if others got this diagnosis, they would be apt to go home and retire. And
What was the diagnosis?
It was, I think it was a terminal diagnosis.
He would be dead by June.
Okay, that wasn't public, but yeah, okay. That's it was grim. That's what I was going to say. I don't think
with a heart problem, by the way. This was a heart problem.
Right. So the long story short, the president called him to encourage him and thank him, and they had a conversation, and the president mentioned in the course of the conversation, you know how to get my doctors involved, and they did, and within a number of hours, they took him to Walter Reed, emergency surgery. The man has a new lease on life. He acts like he's 30 years younger, and he walked into the conference meeting, and we thought we'd seen a ghost.
Just, because I don't want to have a terrible story about this, I did it for him first and for the vote second. But it was a close second, actually. But I did it for the vote second.
So, there it is. Again, now, how about your health condition, Mr. President? The company behind one of Trump's oft-worn shoe brands. He's buying Florsheim shoes for everybody. We had this story the other day. Marco Rubio wearing these shoes that are like easily a size and a half or two sizes too big for him. They're all just wearing them and saying they feel great, Mr. President. Look great, feel great. And if you don't wear them, he asks, where are the shoes? How come you're not wearing them? Well, that company behind some of these go-to shoe purchases is seeking a refund for the tariffs that Donald Trump imposed. Waco Group, which owns the footwear brands, including the ones that Trump has purchased, they are suing the federal government over tariffs. The shoemaker filed a lawsuit betting that the U.S. Supreme Court would strike down the tariffs that Trump has enacted under that International Emergency Powers Act, and that bet was right. And so, indeed, Florsheim may be getting money back. Sort of awkward, but that is the truth. You can see all of those different brands that are covered in that company's holdings, and Florsheim is one of them. Washington's hottest commodity, D.C.'s hottest commodity, is a 10-digit number that can swing financial markets, drive the news, and shift policy, but only if the timing is right. There are reports out of the White House that President Trump's personal phone number has been offered for sale to deep-pocketed interests seeking influence.
What?
Yeah. Quote, "It's honestly just wild," said one person. Quote, "I've heard of CEOs offering money for his number. I've heard of crypto bros offering cryptocurrency for it." Apparently, journalists have taken to horse trading among themselves, offering the contact information of other world leaders, or sometimes even dozens of different names of people and contact information just to get the most important one saved into their phones. "It's out of control," said one person who is a top official. And they say it's like a wrecking ball. No one could see this coming at the start of Trump's second term, when the number was closely held by the president's friend and a handful of journalists who used it sparingly. But so many people now call Trump on his private iPhone that his advisors have stopped trying to keep track. Sometimes in meetings, he will have his phone face up, allowing staff to see all the flashing notifications or missed calls piling up on the screen.
Isn't this one of the reasons that the president of the United States is not supposed to have a personal cell phone?
Of course, you're right. It's supposed to be a secured phone.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be a government phone. And again, this is something that the Republicans vilified the Obama administration or Hillary Clinton for keeping any information that was not private, not government controlled. She had the private server in her home, you'll recall that. And she was vilified for it. Well, I mean, that was them. This is now. In fact, you remember Obama loved his BlackBerry, and he had to give it up when he became president. Had to use the government issued. I mean, all that stuff is just stuff of the past. So if the money's right, you too might be able to call the president.
And isn't there supposed to be a record of the conversations the president has with people? And they're saying now that so many people are calling his cell phone, they can't even keep track of it?
They can't keep the track of the record. And there's supposed to be a record of people who come visit the president, and we're not keeping that record either. So, again, that's for most presidents, but it's not for this president. That is your chunk of Trump.
That's it for this edition.
Well, I really enjoyed it.
But make sure to join us again next time
I think you might want to listen. There's nothing wrong with listening.
for another chunk of Trump.
Right on, everybody. Right on. Got to do a quick mention of a partner.
The Mark Thompson Show.
A partner and sponsor of our show is Zellman's Minty Mouth. You can probably tell from wherever you are listening or watching that I myself have the fresh, clean breath of an angelic presence. Am I right? Yes, I know. Well, I wish I could say it's all me, but it's actually Zellman's. In fact, when you drink as much coffee as I do, you appreciate Zellman's Minty Mouth. It gives me that fresh, minty taste, but then the real action starts when you swallow the mini capsules, tiny capsules. I take 3 at a time. So powerful mint on the outside, it gives you that fresh, clean taste. But on the inside, those capsules, after you swallow them, parsley seed oils released, and that actually does interact with the stuff in your stomach and fights the odors that can cause bad breath. Try it for yourself. I mean, it really does work.
Yeah.
It's been proven to work. They spent all this money, I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a study to make sure they could say that. And indeed, they can. No artificial sweeteners, no xylitol, no preservatives, just huge results from these tiny capsules. It is called Zelmins, Z-E-L-M-I-N-S, Zelmins.com. You get 15% off when you use our discount code, MARK-T. MARK-T at checkout gets you 15% off, and you too will have wonderful, clean, angelic breath just like I do. Oh, it'll be wonderful. You will love it. I know. Zelmins.com, MARK-T for 15% off.
Hey, which one do you use, Mark Thompson?
Use Mark Thompson.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Quick check. I think we've done all the comments. I think it's time to...
Here's one. There's one left.
The Department of War is claiming they have limited inventory on drones, but can spend $22 million on steak and lobster and $98,000 for a grand piano. Thank you. Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, the totally bizarre way in which money is spent at the Pentagon is, again, unregulated, unwatched. That's the stuff we know about. Government waste under these guys is at a level we have never seen before. I mean, it really is. There is a government that is subsidizing a luxury lifestyle for these guys who are there in the Trump administration.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. Where is JD? Says, what's the sizzle? Let me tell you, let me just spend 30 seconds on JD Vance. JD Vance is now having to carry water for a war that he never would have wanted. He celebrated the fact that Donald Trump would end wars worldwide, and he was sort of the peace president. That was something that JD Vance was full-throatedly claiming on the campaign trail up to the winning of the presidency that Donald Trump did. Now he has to do an awkward reverse of field, and JD Vance is really perhaps one of the casualties of all of this. I'm talking about political casualties, because how do you in any way right this ship if you're JD Vance? In fact, I think I saw something, maybe it was in the Atlantic. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Yeah. Here is, let me just pump this up, and I'll share this with you. It's really, I think it's maybe it was Vanity Fair. I love this piece, and I wanted to share it with you. And let me share a little bit, even though I'll run a minute or two over. JD Vance. Here's the piece, or a little bit of it. No one lands on a presidential ticket if they're not outrageously ambitious. Nearly every Veep for at least a century has fancied themselves a future president, but Vance is particularly brazen. Becoming Trump's running mate required a years-long effort to ingratiate himself with a guy who Vance had, in the pages of Vanity Fair, referred to as cultural heroin. Elsewhere called him America's Hitler. That's what he said about Trump. Maybe J.D. Vance's ambition blinded him to Mike Pence's lesson, but the war in Iran is teaching it to him the hard way. The first year of Trump's presidency, Vance's Faustian bargain looked like just that, a bargain. Though smart, Vance is not especially talented as a politician. He won elections to the Senate from Ohio only with Trump's endorsement. He lacks anything like Trump's charisma. And by signing on with Trump, he not only ended up one heartbeat from the presidency, but also became the heir apparent to Trump's political movement and the presumptive GOP nominee in 2028. Trump has often lavished praise on Vance. Vance's clearest rival, Marco Rubio, said that he won't run if Vance does. But Trump's recent military policy has complicated this easy ascent. Vance has built a political profile around his opposition to foreign intervention. He traces that to his own disillusionment while serving as a Marine in Iraq. And that worked well with Trump's first-term image. I mean, if not the reality, at least the image, right? But it clashes with the imperial ambitions of Trump's second term. Vance was conspicuously missing when Trump launched the January raid to abduct Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. Vance has also been scarce since the start of the Iran war, which threatens to turn him into a threatens to turn into a quagmire, I should say, with record speed, right? The Iran campaign shows, as one wrote recently, within the Trump administration, Vance's opinions seem to matter less and less. Even worse for Vance, Rubio is ascendant. MAGA gadfly Laura Loomer noted that when Trump spoke in Vance's home region last week, the Secretary of State got gushing acclaim from the president. All Vance got was short shrift. Vance has begun making statements in support of the war, but they appear to emerge from clenched teeth. I mention all of this because I would say, I'm going to not read the entire piece. I wanted to read a good chunk. That JD Vance is taking on water politically. JD Vance knows better. He's always known better. When he called out Trump initially, before he became joined at the hip with Trump, when he called him a cultural heroine and called him America's Hitler, that's when he was speaking his mind. But now, JD Vance is taking on political water. He sold his soul and got the vice presidential nod, says resist, evolve. Yeah, and I think he'll pay a price. In any case, someone asked about JD Vance. I forget who it was, but I wanted to share that with you. So that's the word on JD Vance. Yeah.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'd personally like to stay, but we have to wrap up. Trump's lifelong ambition has been nothing more than a vanity project, says Tom Graves. Yeah, I mean, well, he's winning in terms of getting his name on everything, and in terms of, I mean, getting an entire party to cow to his wishes. It's pretty remarkable. But in Iran, he has turned the world economy on its side potentially, and he will pay a huge price for this. After the last 10 minutes talking about Trump, you're going to need to use the whole pack to get the taste out of your mouth. Even then, it won't be enough. Mark Elliott, thank you for that. That's funny. Yeah, where's that?
Bring me all the Zellmans.
Where's that Zellmans when I need it? Exactly. Tomorrow, it's the wonderful, is it Mo Kelly here tomorrow? Or no.
Yeah, Mo Kelly's here tomorrow.
For the Mark
Yeah.
And John Bachman is here tomorrow.
Okay. I got to go to the doctor tomorrow. Sorry, I can't be here. Trump will tell you what my condition is. Until tomorrow, bye-bye.